acting's such a beautiful experience. Nobody talks about that enough. Like, it's just that people say, "Oh, did you take this home with you? Did you feel poisoned? Was there a toxicity to it?" It's incredible joy to play. Like when you prepare this as much as I did and had, it's just complete play.
Welcome to another episode of the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. I'm Chris Bush.
And I'm Dean Slider.
On the Filmosophers, we talk about film and filmosophy with the people who make and who love the movies. And we are thrilled to have as our guest in conversation today, writer, actor, director, Daniel Gillies. Many of our audience will know from 5 seasons as the vampire Elijah in the CW series The Originals, which sprang off from the hit show Vampire Diaries, and now with a new movie coming out called Coming Home in the Dark. And we're going to talk about that film.
The operative word is dark.
Yeah. No, but really interested in discussing this with you. And Daniel, in this film, I don't want to give anything away, but you play a casually malevolent drifter, oozing charisma and malevolence. Will you talk to us a little bit about the film and how you came to land the part and your experience with the movie?
Well, it's very gratifying to hear, like, words like adjectives like charismatic and things like that, because I've seen that in a number of reviews, which I shouldn't be reading, because to me that was not at all the intent. And that sounds like I'm sort of paying myself a compliment here, but that wasn't the intent at all. I wanted to make him, certainly in the short story, he has a prowess with language and a certain kind of working intelligence, and he's definitely relatively well read considering the circumstances from whence he came. But to circle back to the question, how did I come to this? I had just signed with an agent in New Zealand by the name of Karen Kay, and fortunately, I had been recommended to the director. The director was coming out to Los Angeles to meet with a handful of actors, including Cliff Curtis, who lives out here, who was going to do the film at one point or another. And this gentleman, Elwick, recommended to the director that he meet with me, which I thought was amazing. I read the script. Thought the script blew me out of the water, and I asked to see this gentleman, James Ashcroft's short films, which I did, and he had done 9, and I watched, I think, the last 2 or 3. And I could tell immediately this guy was a stunning filmmaker. So once the offer came through, I was delighted. But James and I hit it off because we were both film geeks, and really a lot of what we talked about was the films that came to mind for me when I was reading it. And one of them was, Wake Up in Fright, which I thought is a stunning masterwork. And I'd only recently seen it right before we met, and we brought up Bruno Dumont's 29 Palms, which is, like, I think is a thrilling piece of work. And there was one other film I think I brought up, and right at the end of the interview, he said to me, "Well, those are actually some of my major influences for the film," which made me really delighted. Who knows if my my geekdom won me the role? Maybe it did a little bit. No, and just knowing what texture he was going for, But I mean, the guy made the short film that won me was just a film about some marching girls, girls, Americans would say band girls, and it was very simple, adorable little story, but it was just so charmingly shot and beautifully intimate. This guy captures an intimacy that I knew was really exciting. So I wanted to be on board.
Well, for our viewers who have not yet seen the film, I do highly recommend it. And without a lot of spoilers, would just say it's set in the New Zealand. You don't say outback. What what would you say there?
Yeah, what would you say?
Countryside.
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 Thank you,
Okay.
Christopher, for
Okay.
reminding me of my own colloquialisms.
Okay.
Um,
It's a, you know, it's a happy little family of four that find themselves suddenly terrorized by these two guys, of whom you are the leader. And it's a very simple. I love the simplicity, really, of the storyline. That it just allows so much space for what's going on, for really drilling deep into the personalities, and when they're put under this kind of duress. And in particular, I got to say right off, you are just riveting in this thing.
oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I mean, really, there's just so much. You're so internal in the thing, and we just I found myself so fascinated. What is going on inside this guy? Where is all this coming from? And it's clearly brewing from a place that is, you know, very deep and very intense.
I mean, I think there's a certain freedom. Well, for one thing, you know, this adaptation of films from short stories. So the short story by Owen Marshall ends after very shortly after the event, I'll say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that you met with in the first 13 minutes. It's very briefly after that's where the movie ends. So James and Eli Kent, his co-writer, had like a good deal ahead of them in terms of fleshing out the rest of the movie. I think it's a good place to go when you're exploring the questions that interest you and philosophical sort of thought experiments. Do you know what I mean? And that's ultimately what the film is. I mean, it's dressed in all of the finery of a thriller or a psychological thriller or horror, but it's not those things, because, and in fact, it's more horrific, in my opinion, because when you're belted into the amusement park ride that is, say, you know, any horror, take your pick, you know, there is a willing suspension of disbelief that separates you from what it's relative. It might never happen. It might disturb you on a metaphorical level, perhaps even on a dream level, like someone like Lynch. But unfortunately for the audience, unfortunately, I guess this movie is, these two men, you could meet them, like they could descend upon you, and so it really poses the questions of, you know, sort of the moral conundrum, really, of like it's sort of a reckoning. And I'm sort of tiptoeing my way around the minefield of spoilers, but it's really about, like, if you're complicit in a crime, are you complicit in a crime if you are a witness and did nothing? Really, that's kind of what it comes down to. And I love the way there's a sparse quality to Owen's writing, and indeed, whenever there's an adaptation of a short film, because there's usually, shall I say, a more poetic texture. It allows you to sort of explore, when you do the adaptation to film, those philosophical questions more deeply. So there's more time and there's more space. I mean, in television, one of the most nauseating things you can do, and unfortunately I got very good at this, is you can espouse writing that doesn't have a lot of subtext, you know, that you're essentially doing a hell of a lot of exposition. One thing that I find really interesting about Mandrake is that he's certainly more chatty towards at the beginning of the film. He talks a lot more, and then he becomes more and more sparse the more gradually they get to a particular geographical location.
Mm-hmm.
And which to me is a regression, you know, and I think that all of this, it's pageantry. Do you know what I mean? He might speak about what's just happened, transpired, however horrific, but he's just as likely to talk about the weather, or, you know, having, or Tubbs's halitosis. You know, he's sort of it's a sort of a very artful game of cat and mouse.
Yes, and really the writing of the character and your playing of the character, I think, defies the cliche villains. That's the thing that I love about it. We
That's a
just he's so real and three-dimensional, and we don't know what that third dimension is, and that's keeps us guessing and keeps us really engaged.
It's interesting to see you excited by that, because that's frustrating for some viewers. And I love you. Clearly, you're somebody who watches a lot of film. Because to me, I'm always excited when I don't receive, not always. Sometimes you want some answers, you want a little payoff, you want some justification for why you're there. But really, if there are real questions posed to me about someone and then unanswered, and I'm thinking about them days later, then that's interesting. And I need to say thank you for that's the highest praise, because because James and I worked incredibly hard to make certain that he wasn't a clown. I was worried about the kinds of villains I'd seen, even the ones I love. Like I adore Javier Bardem in No Country, and there's just enough in him to make me think that I might encounter him on a very bad day. But even the texture of that film is still Coen Brothers, and there's still, with the Cormac McCarthy of it, there was still something that was a little cartoonish to me, and I just didn't want, and that's, I'm not calling his performance cartoonish. I'm talking about the texture of the environment of the film.
Right.
Javier is terrifying in that, but I just didn't want to do basically anything that I'd seen before.
Right.
And there's a danger that it can really lure you in, if you're not careful.
Yeah. And the thing you said about how Mandrake becomes quieter as the film progresses, as we approach this particular setting, which is part of his kind of central trauma, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And that a part of that for me was that he seems to be so much about control, and the film is so much about control, about this person controlling everyone else, controlling the whole family, and we feel that he's so completely in control, so completely confident. And then where we just start to see the subtle cracks in his confidence as we get somewhere, we start to round the bend around 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. We just start to see so subtly him kind of feeling, maybe I don't have everything together here.
Yeah, and it's sort of it infantilizes him, I think, the journey. I think that there's a return to his nightmare as well. I mean, he might be dragging, but the thing is, a man like this is accustomed to walking in nightmare. That's where he lives.
Right.
And so he's totally prepared to show Hoagie what just another day looks like to him.
Right.
For those of the audience who are intrigued by this conversation, interested in seeing the film Coming Home in the Dark, it is intense. There is graphic violence, but it's deep. It's a morality tale, and it's I think a real deep look at the legacy of trauma, and like you say, of complicity. It's really powerful. And I did want to, before I forget, just mention, Daniel, there's a line the character Mandrake has near the beginning of the film where he says, something along the lines, if you look back at this occasion, this might be the moment you wish you had done something.
Yeah.
Now, what mad genius thinks of a line like that?
Yeah, that's really I don't remember if it's in the short story. I'm pretty certain it's not. That's James and Eli, and you're really taking a huge risk with a line like that, because it could very well remove the audience from where they are. You have to. It takes such confidence to have a line like that, because it actually removes the fourth wall for a very brief second, in a way, for me, but And
that line completely gave me chills and
yeah, well,
completely ramped up the whole effectiveness of the film for me.
Well, so I felt like, I had a real job to just throw it away and almost disguise it. But I mean, that was easy enough during the shooting of it. But it reminded me of, have you guys ever seen Gaspar Noé has one of his first films, I Stand Alone. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, have not.
There's a beautiful moment in that film where I can't remember the exact language, but he puts a warning on the screen. This is before Irreversible, and you're essentially traveling with this butcher, I believe, and and unlike the traditional device of voiceover, you're hearing kind of this incredibly mentally disturbed man's rampant thoughts through the voiceover. And then a warning comes up somewhere 2/3 into the movie that says, look, I'm just going to paraphrase. It says essentially what's going to happen here on in is disturbing. You might want to get out of the theater if you don't want to. He issues a warning. He basically tells him to leave. I mean, I wish I'd seen that in a cinema, because I would have loved to have known how many people would have got up and left. I know that a whole lot of people got up and left when I watched Irreversible. I watched that in the movie theater, and people got up and left that. But yeah, to me, it had the same kind of impact, just at a very different point in the movie. And to be able to thread it into the narrative is kind of even more artful, I think. He's literally throwing a gauntlet to the audience at that point,
But this was subtle, and it was the way you handled it was almost thrown away. It almost like, what did it almost kind of for watching the film was like, what did I just hear?
Yeah, well, it's like a musing. He's just musing.
Yeah.
Himself, like he might as well. He could very well have just thought that thought and not said it out loud.
Yes. Yeah.
But for the fact that he loves the sound of his own voice, particularly in the beginning.
Speaking of warnings to the audience, there's one thing I feel compelled to say here, which is that years ago, I watched a show on PBS, and it was a retired Chicago police detective telling people how to keep themselves safe in various situations. And he talked about the situation where a mugger pulls a gun on you. Right? And what he says is, the outcome of this encounter is determined in the first 5 seconds. And what you need to do in those first 5 seconds is run away as fast as you can. And he explained how most people in that situation will think, well, he's got a gun on me, I have to do what he says. If he says, lie down on the ground, I have to lie down on the ground. If he says, just drive me to your ATM and take out the money and then everything will be fine, you have to do that. Don't do that. Run away. And the police detective broke down the percentages. In something like only 50% of cases will he actually shoot at you, and in only 50% of those, 30% or something will he hit you, and only 7% of those will he hit something vital. So in the early part of the film, where your character produces a gun and starts controlling people in a very very sadistic way, I kept thinking, no, run, don't cooperate. So in real life, folks, run.
All right, good to know. Daniel, I'm interested to know, you had a lot of success in television. You made your own film, Broken Kingdom, several years ago, wrote and directed. Just in terms of what this film could be for you, and I'm confident it will get an audience, and it will, your performance will garner a lot of attention. I'm sure it already has. It's very highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. How strategic are you about advancing your career? I'm just really keen to know, is it kind of a one foot in front of the other? Do you turn things down? Do you pursue certain projects? How's it work for you?
It's a really great question, man. It's quite a personal one, but because I think people are very dishonest about the way they answer these questions. So I'm going to try and be as honest as I can when answering this. it's, I'll begin by saying that I don't care who you are. Like, as you could be Meryl Streep, you could be a guy who's just done a repertory theatre production in provincial New Zealand for, Love's Labour's Lost. You're always thinking of it. You're always thinking of, how am I going to nurture this thing? Am I damaging my career? Am I furthering it? I'm going to pivot slightly and say, look, I think you're in less danger than you were a while ago, Chris, because I look at things like, so even 10 or 15 years ago, say, and I did do, I did a movie a while ago. I'm not going to name it, but it was my first time as a lead in an American film. It was with a girl who was a big rising star. It was with a director who had been nominated for an Academy Award twice for his work, and I went into that work kind of very, very openly and with a good deal of vulnerability and the script wasn't amazing, but I thought, this guy sort of assured me about where he was going to steer it, and that just wasn't the case. The guy wasn't ready to make a film, and I made that mistake once. It was a hard mistake to make, but I'm using that as an example because often we're the first ones who are blamed. When a film sucks, we get told we're terrible. Like, I've seen actors do mediocre performance in beautifully written films, and people often say, oh, look at his performance. I'll be like, there's nothing there. He's in a very good film, or she's in a very good film. Similarly, conversely, you can be in I've seen great performances in really bad films, and people are like, oh, he's terrible, she's terrible, and you're at the mercy of what was built. You were not the architect. So to pivot tangent back, you can really damage yourself, like back in those days, 10 to 15 years ago, by doing a really bad film. I dare say that right now I could make a shitty film tomorrow, and that would garner very little attention, and that which it did would be kind of like critically disparaging, but it wouldn't hurt me. We're almost in an era where, oh, you're in a thing, that's great. Like, it's almost, I can't tell if that's a good or a bad thing. The jury's out on that one.
Why is this? Why is this? What has changed?
I think that people are less discerning, and we've told them over and over again that they're less discerning, and we've told them. I think I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any way. I don't like that sort of idea, but just that the hard facts are, movie studios are making less and less films. When they do make them, they make these giant, blindingly splendid things which don't engage the mind or soul in any way. And I think we're told that entertainment is just for entertainment's sake. And so now, when there's a thing that doesn't, there's such a volume of content, and even the most pedestrian viewer knows really that 70% of them don't quite work, but it doesn't matter so long as they get a moment or two. And I think that there's just such a deluge. When there was less made, there was more attention upon the thing that was really terrible. Like if you were conducting, the Razzies that they have in Australia every other, if you're conducting those these days, I mean, there's just an embarrassment of riches, right? Because there's just too much stuff to be made. In fact, it will almost be difficult to make because you couldn't pinpoint what's terrible, because in the days where, for example, the film I just mentioned, but was nominated for a couple of Razzies, it hurt me. I'll come back to that in a second. But what's interesting is, in those days, there was less made, and so there was attention on that, say, film or television show, and there was actually it could resonate with the public. Now, like, the funniest, most terrible thing made is something that, I mean, shit, we barely have time to see the good things anymore. But I do feel like, just to go back to your question, Chris, like I think about it all the time, and I've turned down a number of things, man, in the wake of this. it hasn't given me the keys to the kingdom thus far. A lot of people are very excited about it, and we'll see what happens. But on the heels of that, and in the wake of that, I want to be very careful about what I do next. That said, like most actors, I have children and I have financial obligations, and so if a payday comes along, I kind of, a real one that's even mildly good, I don't really have a choice, And I know that's not the answer you want to hear.
No, I had no expectation.
It's certainly not the one I want to say, but it's sort of the truth for 99.5% of actors. Look, if I was Will Smith or or George Clooney, like these, you can afford to take those breaks, but I just had to survive.
Well, who are the actors that coming up you really inspired you, that you felt you wanted to emulate?
I never wanted to emulate anyone, but I admired the way certain actors, there's many, like I love Liv Ullmann, for her just unrelenting and brutal vulnerability, which it made me kind of feel as if women were better actors than men naturally. I just I love, like everyone, I love Brando because of his breathtaking ability to lure you into like a universe, not just a moment, but like a whole world, and his relaxation. I loved Philip Seymour Hoffman, Mads Mikkelsen. I love there's a whole Isabelle Huppert. I love actors like this, actors that I felt were transporting me, and that I was able to just sort of people who sort of disappear into their roles. I like those people. I now like kids like Jesse Plemons, and I think he's magical. And there's some amazing actors like Casey Affleck I love, and there's some fabulous actors around. I just I pray for work more like this, so that there's a bit more of a ubiquity of the kinds of questions that are asked by films like this.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate the candor, and it's fascinating to hear just your insights on the personal, the professional, the artistic, commercial, where they join, and how you navigate. What must be a very challenging pathway.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, I might be a cautionary tale. I might not be I'm not sure that I am. You can glean much wisdom from what I just said.
Do you enjoy watching yourself on screen? Is that challenging for you? Is it hard? Are you very critical? Is it?
Yeah. I can always see what I could have done better, and now and again there are moments that I like, and there are certainly more moments in a movie like Coming Home in the Dark that I like because the film breathes. It actually breathes and allows you to. It doesn't condescend its audience, and it expects them to be intelligent. And so a movie, this movie doesn't spoon feed, and because it doesn't, it allows for moments that I end up liking of my performance. But for the most part, I don't like. I don't like seeing what I do. I just want. It sounds weird, but like I just want to get the F out of the way of the of the filmmaking. I want to be so ready that I'm just a servant.
There are some actors, some of them famously, who claim never to have watched themselves on screen, and then other actors who claim that everyone who says that is lying.
Yeah, well, I definitely wanted to see this. I wanted to know if it was as good as I thought it was, because while making it, I thought, well, even when reading it and just talking with James in the beginning, I had the suspicion that it was very good. And then once we started shooting, it was like, okay, now this still feels really strong. This feels powerful, And yeah, I can't speak on behalf of anyone else. But when someone like Robert Redford says, I've never seen anything that I've done, like I remember him saying he caught himself on the Sting one night, like late one night with his niece, I think, and he said, and I watched, and he goes, I kind of enjoyed it. But I actually, I don't know. That guy seems like a man of his word. Mm-hmm. I'm inclined to believe Robert Redford if he says he hasn't watched most of what he's done.
Do you generally feel when you're in the middle of shooting, can you feel that, yeah, this thing is really working, it really is strong, what we wanted to create, or maybe, better things, surprises that are coming out and it's getting into the camera, and then other times when you feel, oh, we're just stinking up the joint. Do you feel you pretty much know while you're in the middle of it?
No, that you don't. You really don't. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are or how long you've been doing it. Like you can think I just killed that. That was an amazing scene, and you'll see it, and it's dreadful. And there are other times we think none of this is working. It's like theater. I did theater for years before I was a television and film actor, and and I would just think I am stinking up the joint. I'm completely off. This is terrible. This is the worst. And then people will say, I don't know what you did tonight, but like something, you pulled some kind of magical rabbit out of that hat. Mm-hmm. You're shooting rainbows from your ass. And it's like, there's nothing, I don't know what, I think the actor's the worst judge of his or herself. I think you just need to remain in the scenes and see what happens, and don't manufacture anything.
I think that's it. Just control what you can control, because there's so much that's out of your hands, and it's really a crapshoot. You hope you're in the hands of a good director, a good editor, a good cinematographer, and that it all comes together, because you can have all the ingredients and the souffle falls flat.
Absolutely, man. It's so true. And it's such a beautiful, like acting's such a beautiful experience. Nobody talks about that enough. Like, it's just that people say, oh, did you take this home with you? Did you feel poisoned? Was there a toxicity to it? Was there a residual kind of lingering vulnerability, or more just like, did you feel poisoned in a way? But I'm like, no, it's incredible joy to play. Like when you prepare this as much as I did and had, it's just complete play, and maybe there's something obscene and perverse about my character, my personal Daniel's character, in that I love the safety of being able to go that far. I love the safety of being able to be monstrous. And we ought to explore the monster in us, because God knows we're living in an environment right now where there are monsters all around us.
Yep. Well, just express it in front of the camera and not at home, and all will be good. Part of our format, Daniel, is that we like to do is explore some of our guests' favorite films, which we didn't have a chance to do this time. But perhaps we could have a part 2 and geek out on some of your favorite films. Would be really fun.
I'd love that. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a real honor to be here today, and keep up the good work.
Thank you for joining us, Daniel Gillies. Really been a delight.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for joining us on the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. Please subscribe to stay up to date on our newest episodes.